moved out of my apartment into a new place after dealing with a psychotic roommate, and I thought I would wait until I'd left to relate the tale of the mother and daughter that lived in my apartment with us. I moved to the place in early August. It's a third floor through in a brownstone, a beautiful old building with hardwood floors and wall moldings and quaint modeled light fixtures, the whole bit. My landlady, who lived right downstairs, grew up in the house. Perhaps she could have shed a bit of light on the situation had her English been better. In any case, the rent was practically nothing, and I had 2 rooms to myself. It was too good to be true. My roommate had already lived in the apartment for 3 years. He had told me that Amelia, the landlady, often let herself in to check on things without knocking. So, when I felt someone watching me, I figured it was Amelia. Every time I turned around, though, there was nobody there. I often thought I saw the edge of a skirt or a black boot heel disappearing around the corner, but I could never turn around fast enough. Finally, after a week or so, I mentioned it to my roommate. He replied that he had long suspected the place was haunted. Other sensations contributed to that impression. For example, the cold spots in the kitchen. The entity seemed to concentrate on the kitchen and the back rooms where I lived, the kitchen doorway in particular. One dog day, I was mopping the kitchen floor and sweating like a pig when I suddenly felt cold to the bone. The hackles on my neck stood up, and I knew someone was there with me. Other times, one of us would be cooking, and we could feel someone standing right behind us. When you turned around, of course there was nothing. Strange things continued to happen. Nothing threatening, but nothing easily explained either. A glass of water I had placed on an end table spilled on me in the middle of the night from 8 feet away. My shoes were often paired up neatly in front of the closet in the morning. I came up the stairs to the apartment and I would hear voices in the kitchen. Then, when I fit my key in the lock, they would pass by the front door and into the living room, which lay sort of beyond the front door, and back into my roommate's half of the apartment. Once in the apartment, I could see there was nobody there. Okay, so big deal, you say. And you'd be right. I couldn't prove there were entities in the apartment. Nothing ever manifested to me visually. But I just knew, somehow. I knew there were 2, both female. One about 30 years old and one younger. Maybe 10 or 12 years old. Possibly mother and daughter. I could feel it. Then my suspicions were confirmed on 2 separate occasions. The door slamming and the cat. First, to explain the door slamming. As I mentioned before, the apartment is a floor-through, and on windy days, the doors will often slam shut if they aren't propped open. But occasionally, if something in the apartment were being rearranged or a great deal of noise was being made, the doors in the back would slam shut, open about 6 inches, slam again, open, slam, faster and faster, like a tantrum. After a month in the place, I was fairly used to the various carryings on, and I would yell stop, and the slamming would stop like this, slam, creak, and the door would slowly reopen about halfway. My friend Aaron didn't believe any of this, so once after a few beers in the living room, I called towards the back of the apartment. Aaron doesn't believe in you. If you're in here, slam the back bedroom door. That door was blocked open with a Doc Marten boot, which promptly rolled into the hall. That trick was followed by a symphony of slamming from the back, closet doors as well, which convinced Aaron not only of the ghost's existence, but also of the desirability of leaving for the nearest bar at top speed. The other thing that confirmed their presence was my kitten. I brought him home and let him out of his cat carrier, and he ran under the tub. When he finally consented to come out, he wouldn't go into the kitchen and would meow at something in the kitchen doorway, occasionally growling and fluffing up his tail as if threatened. I always tried to get behind him on these occasions. If I could look between his ears, I might be able to see something or someone, but I could never move fast enough. These presences weren't threatening, as I've said. It was creepy, of course, but more annoying than anything else. This is going to sound utterly foolish, but when I was trying to get out of my hellish roommate situation, I actually asked them to protect me from my roommate, who was getting more and more out of control, going through my things, threatening my friends, coming home trashed every night, and so on. I figured it couldn't hurt to enlist their aid. I finally moved out last Saturday. My dad and brother came to help me cart all my gear to the new place, and I sent my brother up with the keys to lock the door when we had brought the last load down to the van. He came back down and said the door was already locked. Weird stuff, but I have to say that those two, whatever they were probably the most stable thing in my life for 2 months. I was in the Navy a few years ago, stationed at Camp Smith, Hawaii. Apparently, from what I've been able to gather, it was a hospital during World War II. But now, it is the headquarters for the commander of the Pacific Fleet. Certain areas of the main building are said to be haunted, and I have heard more than one story about the elevator in this building, taking people places other than where they want to be. A good friend of mine has told me that she got into the elevator on the first floor one night as she was working mids and had gone downstairs to have a cigarette and pushed the button for the third floor. She then heard some strange music, which sounded to her like a music box, and instead of ascending, the elevator descended into the basement. The doors opened to reveal a man in a wheelchair sitting there staring at her. She screamed and frantically pushed the button again, only to have the elevator return her to the first floor. My experience happened late in the afternoon, around 5 p.m., when pretty much everyone had gone home for the day. I was in the basement, working in a shop that had supposedly been the old morgue, and was going towards the aforementioned elevator to meet my friend on the third deck to get a ride home. As I was walking down the long corridor to the elevator, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around nervously, but nobody was there. I laughed to myself and started walking again, but a little faster. I heard the footsteps again, but slower than I was walking, so I do not think they were an echo of my own footsteps. At this point, I was starting to get a bit freaked, so I broke into a run for the elevator, but heard the footsteps at the same pace. When I got to the elevator, I turned as I went in to look behind me, and saw a dark shadow moving slowly down the hall. I have never been so scared in my life, and I must admit, this was not my first experience with the unexplained. Mercifully, the elevator doors shut, and I pressed the 3. Unfortunately, the elevator stopped on one. As the door opened, I let out an involuntary scream, but fortunately, it was just a soldier who also worked there. He seemed a little relieved to see me too. The elevator proceeded up to the third floor, and we both got out and started walking down the hall to the sentry desk. I stopped and talked to my friend, the Marine who was on post that evening, and the soldier went on into the secured area. I got the strangest feeling though, and turned back around to face the end of the hall that I had just come from. And there sat the man in the wheelchair. I cannot explain the footsteps in the hall or why the man in the wheelchair moves from floor to floor, but I have heard that he scared the heck out of a female Marine standing post one night. I can't say how much of that is true, but I can say that I have seen one other thing at night on the 3rd floor. I was standing out on the breezeway having a cigarette when I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A man in Cracker Jacks, dressed blues, was walking away from me, turned and waved at me, then turned and vanished. I know this doesn't seem scary, but it scared the heck out of me when it happened. While touring all over Great Britain by myself, I visited Stirling Castle in Scotland. For some reason, I think it might have been a British holiday, there were only a handful of people wandering around inside the castle walls. The sun was beginning to set, and I had a train to catch, so I was trying, with little success, to find my way back to the gatehouse where I came in. I turned a corner and saw a man. He was wearing typical Highlander garb of plaid kilt, etc. So I figured he worked there and could point me toward the entrance. I called out to him asking which way the front gate was. Seeming not to hear me at all, he rounded a corner and disappeared from sight. I followed, but when I turned the same corner, he was nowhere in sight. I continued walking in the direction he'd gone, sort of down a ramp I thought might go under some buildings and come back up where I needed to be, but the ramp came to a dead end. I really didn't think much of it. I just figured he'd gone through some secret, employees-only door, but I do remember wondering where the hell he'd gone. I backtracked, found my way to the gatehouse and caught my train. While heading back to London, I pulled out the souvenir booklet I'd gotten at the castle, opened it to the map, and tried to figure out where that guy had gone. No luck. The ramp that dead-ended had at one time led to an underground dungeon, but for safety reasons, the entrance had long since been bricked over. I shrugged my shoulders and never gave any more thought to the incident until last fall, when, while channel surfing one Friday night, I tuned into a show called Sightings that's all about UFOs and ghosts and such. Though I'd never seen this show before, something in the preview, the teaser at the beginning, where they say what's going to be on, caught my eye. It was a segment about Stirling Castle, so I decided to watch. And just thinking about this right now has my hair standing on end. Among the ghost sightings were numerous accounts of people seeing a man in Highlander garb round a corner and disappear in the area of the old dungeon entrance. So, it took me 13 years to learn that I had seen a ghost and didn't know it at the time. Looking back, I'm really glad I didn't know it at the time. I've never believed in ghosts. In fact, I'm still stubbornly trying to find some other explanation. But if I ever get back to Stirling, I'm going to make sure I'm with a large group of people.